Hello, everyone. We are live. This is Nick Allen with Better Together on the Sunday show. We are very excited to welcome friend and consistent guest. Let's say it's been a few months, but Council Member Scott Beilfuss. How's it going today, Scott?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Good, good. It's a beautiful day. So it's a great day to live in Grand Junction.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
Yep.
right. Well, speaking of Grand Junction and your role as a city council member, what's going on right now? What are some of the top items that you would like to kind of highlight for us today?
Well, last week, as you know, we worked a lot on the salt flats thing. And there's the housing affordability task force is in motion. I went to one of those meetings last week. Lots of stuff going on with homelessness for me personally. I've got some I went to a lot of meetings last week, so I probably have a few things to say about just about everything.
Sure.
Um, the city is poised to do a little bit of cuts. It sounds like we backed off a little bit on some of the cuts for the budget for next year, and so we'll talk about that. The city, as you know, the city seems to be doing fairly well, but costs are going up. And we pretty much live on sales tax. So the
Hmm.
conversation always has to start with revenue. And, our biggest part of our job as city council is to balance the budget and, do everything we can to keep up as many services as possible. There's been a lot of growth in the rec department, and, that'll come online next year with the new rec center. So that's going to be additional budget. Um, so we'll see. I mean, there's a different council right now. There's a lot of ideology going on, not so
Mm,
much, hard facts about things, which is a little frustrating. But, I get my 2 cents in. I'm glad I'm on council and can represent a lot of the community. And, Grand Junction swings left and right and center. I've been here 40 years and we've seen a lot of different things. The young people on the council don't realize, Grand Junction was pretty much run by oil and gas for a long time. And it really didn't benefit the community much, especially not towards the end, because oil and gas was not a part of the community. I mean, towards the end, they were bringing all their people in on 2 year rotations. They used up a lot of apartments, and but never really became part of the community. When the Halliburton and Schlumberger closed up, it's been 12 years now.
hmm.
But 3,000 jobs left a community really fast. And it was definitely a hit. But since then, we've worked our way back. We have a more diverse economy. I think we need a lot of work on economic development yet. Certainly, probably the number two thing I hear from the community all the time is when are we going to get better jobs?
Sure.
And that's been an issue since I moved here. So, I'm actually, I'm doing some work on the economy and what it looks like now, and hope to put this, some things together. I'm hoping to partner with Robert Ballard a little bit. He likes to dig in on data, and not everybody on council does, but he seems to. And I think, together we can toss around some ideas and use them on some of the different committees. Grand Junction Economic Partnership, GJEP,
Hmm.
is a big part of the community, and visit Grand Junction, the tourism piece. There's a
Hmm.
lot of economic pieces going on, airport authority. A lot of those things people don't think about every day, but they're big parts of our economic drive. And I'm on the business incubator board. So, the police and fire and streets and recreation get all the attention. But there's a real lot of work going on underlying with the economy. So,
Yeah, no doubt. And with
excuse me.
obviously the economy is what powers city budget. And we heard, and it's my understanding that we're facing like potentially $11 million deficit, or at least, compared to last year.
It seemed to be a little bit of an update the other day. Just hearsay was that was down to $4 million. So
Okay.
I don't know why that was. If they were adjusting things, a lot of times they'll bring you a revised package,
Hmm.
you know,
Well,
we'll
one
get it on
thing,
the 29th.
okay, that just came out on the 29th. You said is another packet's coming out?
Well, 29th is the first introduction to the budget, and there'll be a lot of conversations with groups that are recipients of the budget.
Hmm.
DD, downtown development, the homeless community, anybody on the outside that is funded partially by the city. We'll start talking about that quite a bit.
Okay, okay, that's good to know. So walk us through, I mean, part of what Better Together, our goal is to kind of just educate the community on ways that they can get involved. And obviously a budget and determining where our tax dollars go is such a massive um, issue in, what the city does. So you mentioned groups are going to start getting involved. Can you just walk us through what does the budget process look like? How can more people get involved in it?
Well, the budget, Greg Caden used to always say the budget was Greg Caden, our previous city manager, used to always say that the budget was a result of 8,000 hours of city government departments working on, their revenue expectations and spending expectations. There's a lot of consideration of budgets. There's some capital, plans in there. So, to keep an eye on what goes up. So by next Friday, they will be releasing the information for the 29th meeting on September 29th. And so the public can access that. It'll all be up on the Grand Junction government agendas, and you can download all that and look at it. I'm looking at last year's budget, and it was 315 pages long.
Okay.
So, don't plan anything next weekend. You're going to be looking at the budget. And if you're a accounting nerd, it's dessert every day. If you're a regular person off the street, there's a lot of parts that are very palatable, but there's a lot of parts that are really confusing.
Hmm.
So, it'll be a good opportunity for people to look back. Unfortunately, it doesn't usually, well, maybe it will. There will be some kind of lead in about what the changes are for the coming year and what the challenges are. So we know the coming year sales tax so far has been flat, which is not bad. It's better than declining. We know that wages have gone up a little bit. I think city employees got a 2% raise. Not big, not even cost of living, but it's what
Better
they,
than some.
yeah, yeah, that's what I heard. And as we all know, healthcare costs are going up a lot here, and that's a big part of our benefits package.
Hmm.
So we not have not seen what that actually means. Unfortunately, some of the shift on the healthcare costs always goes to the employee. So yeah, you got a 2% raise, but oh, by the way, your healthcare costs might have gone up 4%. So there's a lot of that sort of thing going on. The city revenues also include some other taxes. There's the first responders tax, there's the bed tax for tourism, and all of those are tied to, they're indexed to the sales tax revenues. So they should be kind of on the same level, and we'll see what it looks like. I was optimistic for a while over the summer because things seem to be going quite robustly around there. A lot of visitors, a lot of events going on. That all means sales tax revenues. But we also know that for the local people, they were heavily burdened with housing costs and rent keeps going up. I kind of thought maybe we'd be caught up by now, but it doesn't seem that way. So rents are not declining.
Right.
Cost of housing, there's a lot more homes on the market right now, but they're not, affordable. People are holding tight, and buyers are holding tight. They're diving into it because the interest rates are still high. So there's a lot of moving parts to that whole revenue thing. I was out with a friend looking at EVs yesterday. There weren't any EVs available anymore because everybody jumped on the last chance for tax credits. But there wasn't a lot of traffic in the car lots, and auto sales tax revenues is a big part of our budget. So
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
not really a good sign. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of this stuff is putting your finger in the air and see which ways the wind is blowing, but and what you hear on the streets is as accurate as some of the data that's coming out. I mean, nationally, the data is not good.
No, we're
You
getting hammered. It's
know?
awful. I've heard recession, really has just been induced in large part because of the tariffs we're seeing, which is just, taxes, sales tax, really, nationwide sales tax, if you don't have an actual industry policy to attach to it. So it's rough. It's rough across the board. When you're looking at the budget, so 315 pages, that might take a couple days to get through, weeks, but
Yeah.
what what do you jump to? What's the first thing you get this huge packet, obviously impossible just to read through. Where do you like dive the hardest in, would you say?
Well, I mean, mostly it's revenue expectations. We kind of know where staffing is in all the departments right now, and if we don't have to take a big hit, we're not looking for a 20% reduction in a certain department. I may look immediately. The biggest movement in staffing is probably going to be Parks and Rec, with the new rec center, but that's not going
Right.
to happen. That's not going to happen until July. I think they're slated to open maybe August. I talked to the lady that was hired to be the new manager. She said she estimated they will be 13 FTEs on the new rec center. So that'll be 15 or 13 additional spots. Rec center salaries are not like police and fire salaries,
Hmm.
so it's not as big a hit. She did say they would probably be hiring hundreds. Yeah, she said hundreds of part-time and seasonal people for staffing the rec center. That sounds like a lot to me. So I will be looking at that.
A lot of camps. That's a lot of camps.
Well, yeah, and so that's what it is because they're going to shift some like Lincoln Park Barn. A lot of those activities will be moved up there. Um, a lot of things they've done in the parks are going to have additional outside areas at the rec center. So there's going to be a big shift of a lot of services and activities up there, and
Hmm.
that's a lot of people, many of which are in place, but also, they're going to be offering a lot of new programs. We're going to 5 new pools. That takes a lot of management and programs. Um, we got the gigantic basketball, pickleball courts, the running track. There's space for seniors. There's a lot of stuff up there. So, I got to believe that some of those things will be filled by, people just renting the space and doing their yoga classes, kind of like St. Mary's is doing with their PT operation up there. As many of you know, they chipped in several $1 million to help build a office for their physical therapy. And one of the pools is not just built for them; it'll be good for everybody, but it definitely is a therapy pool and heated and all that sort of thing. So there'll be people there on their behalf, but they'll be their employees. So
Hmm.
so there's going to be a lot of bodies going through. Police and fire always have a pretty big hit on increases. Usually it's between 6 to 9% in growth, and those are our biggest cost areas. Um,
Is that typically just around wages, or is there like materials that we're looking to get, new trucks, new?
Fire, yeah, fire. There's always some capital equipment in there. A fire truck is somewhere between $1 and $2 million. Last year there was one in the budget. It was a ladder truck, and I think it was $1.6 million.
Hmm.
And you order those and you don't get them for 2 or 3 years. I think we're not in too bad a shape. It all kind of depends on Station 7. I'll be looking at that. you
Yeah, can
know,
you tell us a bit more
homelessness.
about Station 7? So that's
Well,
currently
as
unoccupied, right?
as the public knows, Station 7 was completed but not staffed. The police or the fire department worked with the firefighters union and they decided not to open it
Mm,
because if they opened it, it would have been partially staffed. And they would rather have a fully staffed station responding out there than a partial.
sure.
So that was an agreement between the firefighters and the administration. So I'm glad they came to that. But, some of the public is anxious for that fire station to open because it means a lot to them as far as their homeowners insurance. My homeowners agent showed me the map they use, and there's big red spaces in the county and bright orange spaces. The red spaces are places they will not insure, and there's a lot of them. A lot of them are up on Glade Park, as you can imagine.
Right.
But there's orange spaces which are kind of teetering on the edge. And for my insurance company, if you're not within, I think it's 8 miles of a fire station, it costs a lot more, or they may deny you insurance. And with all the building that's going out that way, that's a big issue for Fire Station 7. And we are also mutual aid to Lower Valley, which is Fruta. So, that's right over on that end as well.
Well, I know there's a lot to talk about today, but if you could, since fire and firefighters are such a major issue for the city and something we care deeply about, there's discussions around a fire district because the city is getting pulled their resources into non-city areas. What's the status on a fire district, which my understanding would just set up a new tax base for that goes directly to the firefighters and their work?
Right. A district is an undefined um, line around a certain area that is going to use a service. So undefined in that, it's not defined right now. If we said we're going to set up a fire district, um, we would have to, what would that encompass?
Define the
At,
boundaries, yeah.
at one point, there was 17 fire districts in Mesa County.
Wow.
So each one of those districts had their own little fire department.
That's not super efficient, I wouldn't
How does
imagine.
that make sense? Right. So some of those have dissolved just recently, and some of them have merged. So, if we created, right now, we're mutual aid on both sides of the county. So mutual aid means we help out.
Hmm.
And we're more mutual aid on the Clifton side than the Fruita side. So the Clifton side is showing a lot of growth out towards Whitewater.
Right.
Whitewater's got a fire station district. Clifton's got a district. Canna Creek has a district. There's some other one. Gateway has a district. So there's a whole bunch of districts out there. So all of them have a divine space that they tax with property taxes to pay for their volunteer fire. Clifton, I think, has maybe 10 full-time fire people now, maybe not even that many. But, Clifton has to serve Whitewater from their station, which is almost out by I-70, by the Maverick station out in Clifton. So our station that's over by Chipeta is actually closer on a lot of those calls. And
Hmm.
because they only have a small force, very often they're falling back on us. Now, the mutual aid piece is that we help out, but we don't get reimbursed for it. So the firefighters are doing the work, getting paid by Grand Junction, but their service area is in the county or Clifton.
Right.
So if we had a fire district, that fire district could be a merger with Clifton. It could go all the way out to, the county line, and then that whole area would be subject to property taxes that would support the fire district. I mean, you got to believe that sooner or later there's going to have to be some full-time staffing out towards Whitewater somewhere. There's a lot of calls out. Ambulance calls are the biggest calls. as you probably know. And, a lot of ambulance calls on Highway 50. There's a lot of industrial things out there. Clifton put in sewer and water out to Whitewater a couple years ago that has the capacity to service 3 to 4 thousand new homes. So, that's a good sized community.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty cheap or cheaper to build out there is probably why we're just seeing so many houses.
No landscaping, no sidewalks, no street lights, none of that stuff. So yeah, it
Right.
is cheaper, but you don't get amenities either.
Hmm.
So anyway, there are talks with the fire department about creating a fire district that would be more realistic as far as service goes. And when I got on city council, I'm looking at all these different groups, and it's not just, it's roads and police and fire that have mounds of equipment and hundreds of personnel. And it's like, how much do we work together on this? We cannot afford to build all these little empires and not share resources. So there was a lot of pushback from Greg Keaton at the time. He liked having control, full control over everything.
Right.
But I think we're hitting the wall on some of this stuff. And
Hmm.
certainly the county's got a lot of challenges with financing, so we'll see what the discussion looks like. But the firefighters are fully aware of that whole thing, and they're pretty much on board with whatever works.
Yeah, in discussions that I've had with them, they seem fired up about it. So, just real quick, like, what's the next step in that regard for a potential fire district? Is this something that we should, keep an eye out for? Are there ways we can support it?
Well, as you know, there's two things moving with the firefighters. They want full collective bargaining, and that could be done by council or it could be done through a citizen vote. So it may come to the citizens to allow that. And then that would play into whether we go to a full fire district, I guess, because that would be on the ballot as well.
Hmm.
Probably two separate votes. But, who actually is involved in that fire district, we're not sure. They could have some meetings and Clifton might say, yeah, we'll be part of it. Or Clifton might say, we want to go it alone. Now, I was told that Clifton's got a sales tax increase on the ballot for this fall that would include raise their revenues for their fire department. So, and I asked the fire department here if that would complicate things, and they said no. We could actually establish a fire district just with our own boundaries, and then other fire districts could choose to become a part of that.
Hmm.
So it gets a little funky. Nothing's going to happen fast, believe me. But
Sure,
I
right.
think these costs are going to actually drive a lot of these discussions. It has to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially when it just talks about efficiency and just like doubling up services and crossing over each other. It just seems very complicated and unnecessary. So if we can, really try and cut some of this red tape and really have more of a collective approach in our county, I think that could be cost saving and provide better service too.
Well, the other catch too is that these smaller fire districts are volunteer.
Right. Right.
So A, that doesn't play well with homeowners insurance.
Sure. I would
They
imagine.
don't like that. And then B, they keep adding more standards to volunteer firefighters.
Hmm.
So these guys are volunteers, but they're having to go through all kinds of training, certification. It's a big pushback to getting volunteers. So they're not able to be fully staffed.
Yeah, yeah. I worked when I was working in the West End doing organizing there in Montrose. They have a volunteer firefighter, and it's tough on the employer and the employee relationship too. We were talking with some guys. The employer is supposed to have, some understanding with that regard, but they're also like, oh, John is supposed to be at this meeting, but now he's fighting a fire at somebody's house or, helping on a run here across the county, things like that. It's just really difficult. People want to help, but once you expand past that, it needs professionals.
Yep, a lot of liability concerns.
for sure.
You know, what happens if you're fighting a fire as a volunteer and become fully disabled? You
Hmm.
know, I mean, do they really take care of you? Do they have good disability insurance? You know, all those considerations. You know, a lot of those places are equipped with vehicles that cities have given them. So you run into parts problems. You know, oh, we've got a fire truck from Albuquerque. You know,
Right. From the 1950s. Yeah. Yeah. Got
it
buckets.
gets a
So
little third worldish. So.
yeah, no, it's rough. It's rough, especially in these, real rural communities. So anything else in regards to budget? So we're having a big release of documents coming out on the you said
20,
next Friday?
well, 29th they'll start. Yeah. So Friday will be release of the packet for Monday, and I think we have two meetings. And there'll be a lot of information in there. It won't be the final budget, you know, it'll be the beginning of financing by department.
Okay. When is the
So
final budget due?
uh December 31st.
Okay. So just new fiscal year.
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Well, thanks for covering some of the budget. I wanted to jump into a next issue here. Um, an interesting one, let's say. So, one of our really devoted followers has asked, I guess there was a email that one of the council members shared, Robert Ballard, on August 4th about the new executive order by the Trump administration.
Yep.
Yeah, with homelessness. And that was sent around to the community. And this follow of ours, his name is Tom, and is asking, were you the one that leaked this public document to the Democrat Socialists of America?
I don't think so, but I should have checked beforehand. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for it. You know, the whole public knows these are, as soon as you email something to me or we receive something, it's political domain, right? So it's all available to everybody. Anybody can get that information. So it isn't nefarious to be sharing it out there, you know. And why wouldn't we? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it has a big impact on the homeless community around here. It turned out there were quite a few conversations, a little bit in the city, but mostly in the providers to the homeless about that executive order. I personally, I was a little excited about the executive order because it said that, you know, the bad part was that the government could intervene on individuals that had serious mental challenges, addictions, all those sorts of things, take them off of the street against their will
Right. And
and
institutionalize
put
them.
them into some kind of rehab and that sort of thing. Well, you know, the downside is personal, you know, rights. The upside is that they would be safe and maybe get some help. The catch was there's no place for them to get help in the entire state.
Right. And looking at the executive order too, it mentions jails being one of the facilities that they can be sent to.
Great idea. Jails really like that because they've been the place of last resort for mental health issues for a long, long time. They were working their way out of that. And now you're going to dump that on them. I mean, none of this is going to happen. It's pretty much dried up and gone away because the fiscal note that would have to go with that would be in, I don't know, maybe a $500 billion because you'd have to build fully staffed health care, mental health, you know, facilities like our old regional center. You know,
Hmm.
the old regional center, for those that have not been around, you know, is on 53 acres and housed, when I moved here 40 years ago, it had 800 people in it. And
Wow.
those folks had to be staffed 24/7. So there were 1,000 employees there. And this kind of order would be not quite that magnitude, but probably half that size. So, you know, the budget blowout on that would have been huge. So,
Hmm.
no, I mean, that information got out there really fast all over the place. And And as I recall, I did share with somebody, but I don't think it was a Democrat, it's socialist. It was more people within the industry saying, hey, what are we, how are we going to react to this? And
Right. I
agree.
received a message too from somebody in the service community that was concerned and lifted it up. And I remember kind of reaching out to folks, and it was like, no, just executive order really just seemingly more of just a statement versus actual approach. Let's go ahead and just read it actually, if it's okay. So this email was sent out by Councilman Ballard on August 4th. Fellow councilmen and staff. We all know Grand Junction, like many other communities across Colorado and the nation, is facing significant unhousing crisis. Recent presentation of the unhoused survey report revealed a 320 increase in our unsheltered population over the past 6 years, highlighting the urgency of addressing this issue. However, I have concerns about the broad definition of homelessness and the metrics measuring success in our current Grand Junction area unhoused strategy. I'm also concerned there may be conflicts with the new strategic plan and the GJAUS. So first, before we dive into more of this paragraph, has there been a 320% increase over the last 6 years of unhoused?
Well, that's mostly because of the efficiency of the count.
Okay, sure.
And the second part has been the dramatic rise in District 51 homelessness.
Yeah. Yeah. And within this count, are they also counting, you mentioned like students in D51, those
Multiple.
that are like couch surfing or
Yep.
doubled up,
Yes.
that's counted as well?
Hmm.
That's such a massive one too. Just because people aren't just on the street doesn't mean they're not homeless.
Right. There's no perfect numbers on these things. And, I have a hierarchy of homelessness in Grand Junction. A lot of people throw all the homeless into one bucket. And, I've got like a six layered hierarchy of the different kind of homeless here. And, as you add more people into that, as they become that, this pit count, they're called pit counts, so point in time. So it's a short count. It varies a little bit on how they count. And they very much have been a little more accurate recently, and they use a multiplier because they can't get to everybody.
Right.
So, it's not perfect numbers.
Yeah. No, it's still best bet, right? And
Mhm.
to continue on here from the email, additionally, the White House recently issued an executive order providing new guidance for local governments to address homelessness. The order emphasizes a treatment first approach, prioritizing public safety, in quotes, a key focus of our strategic plan, enforcement of laws against behaviors such as open drug use, urban camping, and the rejection of housing first policies that deprioritize accountability. Let me just finish this paragraph, and I would love to dive into that. It also ties federal funding to compliance with these priorities. Given these developments and our strategic focus on core services, fiscal responsibility, government efficiency, transparency, and housing, during the open discussion at tonight's meeting, I'll be asking we draft a resolution amending Grand Junction area unhousing strategy on a future workshop agenda. And then it'll provide kind of the items here. But first, he mentions housing strategy or the housing strategy of housing first. And we have talked about that before. It's something that was in the executive order, which is denouncing that strategy. I'm a supporter of housing first. I believe you are as well. Do you want to talk about why housing first is important and kind of the failures of an executive order to challenge housing first?
Well, the perception on some of those folks is that if you just put them up without any support, they're not going to get better. They're
Right.
just going to be hanging out in a temporary shelter and moving from shelter to shelter, getting services, but not getting out of homelessness. And I mean, we all agree with that. So the housing first part is in working together with services, with case managers. People have no idea how hard it is to get somebody out of homelessness, depending on where they're at. For a lot of the kids with the school district, it might just be providing safe shelter in a two-bedroom apartment until they can get into subsidized housing. For people with serious and chronic mental health issues, it may be 24/7 working with them to keep them safe and get them, on their meds and into some path of stability. Absolutely, they may never be able to go into the workforce, but they're human beings. As a country, we traditionally have taking care of those folks. But we don't have a plan for a lot of them right now. So the housing, I've said 100 times that I'm a housing first advocate, but it is in connection with all the other services that go with it. I've said many times at meetings, at some point, society has to make some decisions on what to do with the chronic homeless community because I would say it's about a third of the homeless community are chronically homeless, and some of them do not want to go into housing, but we need to figure out some way to stabilize them and keep them safe. But the other two-thirds are all, and I hear that from providers all the time. We got people that are just on the edge of getting out of homelessness, but they have no place to live.
Hmm.
They have no transitional shelter. They don't even have, a roof over their head when it's raining out. So, we need some of that. We've got a little group that's working on um, some winter shelter this year. Last year we had none, and we have some good prospects right now. Not tons of beds, but an improvement. And there's still some asks out there that I've made for some additional space. So that would be a step in the right direction. I think if we show the community that we can do some temporary shelter, and also if we have the option to pick who goes into those shelters, we want people that are going in there that have a chance at success and getting out of homelessness. And and the most vulnerable. I mean, aging people are the biggest part of the fastest growing part of homeless community here. We don't want grandpa and grandpa on the street.
Right.
Um, Half the homeless have a serious disability. We don't want them on the street. They're the ones calling the fire department all the time because they get cold and they take a ride into the ER just to warm up,
Hmm.
literally.
Yeah,
So
and that's expensive too.
that's $1,300.
Right.
Yeah, thirteen
Yeah.
hundred dollars.
Well,
So
let's finish up this email on just the last few because it does bring up, I think, some interesting points, especially on how a council member can approach the city. So Robert goes in to provide clear direction for staff drafting said resolution. I intend for the following to be included. Ensure the strategy complies with the executive order to maintain eligibility for federal funding. I know that the executive order talked a lot about housing and urban development. Two, review existing homeless programs and identify opportunities to enhance treatment-based services. Three, clarify the definition of homelessness and establish a measured success metric leading to functional zero, such as reductions in unsheltered populations, treatment enrollment rates, and public safety incidents. Four, emphasize public safety as our primary role through enforcement and treatment focused interventions, streamlined coordination with county resources, and one moment. Maximize federal and state funding for fiscal responsibility. Here's the last part I wanted to make sure I highlighted from Robert's email is I also wanted to add that there is public concern over the civil commitment section of the executive order that we would be remiss to ignore. I do not believe that it would be in the scope of municipal government, but if so, I have reservations that the principle of civil commitment. Therefore, I believe we should exclude support for this section until legal clarity is provided, satisfying individual liberty concerns. I look forward to the discussion. So I
that's a
think we
pretty,
both agree.
that's a lot of layers there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was, a pretty broad strokes executive order. Um, One thing, where do you balance? Because in that piece, in the email, it says, the function of government being safety and enforcement. Where does just the public health side come in? Because I mean, we can arrest everybody and throw them in jail, and I guess that would make
They'd be
things
sheltered, right?
they'd be sheltered, and I guess it would, if you make being homeless illegal, then that is a crime and that increases your crime. But if you just say, hey, people are struggling, let's support them, then it's more of a public safety issue. Or no, sorry, a public health issue than a public safety issue. Where do you kind of balance those ideas?
Yeah, it's again, it goes back to what kind of homeless group you're talking about,
Hmm.
because some are definitely in the, a concern to the public safety, and some are absolutely no concern to public safety, but use a lot of resources.
Hmm.
So, I mean, the estimate is somewhere between 15 and $30,000 a year per homeless person that the community is spending on police, fire, human services, all those support issues that go on. They all cost money. So, when you're talking very narrow about the homeless community about that, you're not really covering everybody. And some of those, I believe, can be helped with a minimal amount of money. Actually, housing is a pretty low cost compared to some of the costs of, take a winter um, episode. You get a solar or a polar vortex comes
Right.
down, hangs in the area for 5 to 7 days. Um, several years ago, we lost 5 people froze to death in the community. More recently, we had 12 people die one year of freezing. Um, but on top of that, we also had dozens of people have serious frostbite and health issues. Some of them suffered from, having to have amputations, permanently disabled. So you think about all those costs, and we definitely there's an investment to go to keep people safe, to help them get out of homelessness, and there's a benefit, an economic benefit to the community. So so we're listening to part of this executive order and going, it sounds like there's money on the way to help out with some of these things, but we haven't seen any yet. And it would have to be channeled, I believe, it would have to be channeled into areas that we have an opportunity for success.
Right. Right. And I mean, that kind of leads also to the constant struggle we're seeing on the national stage around who gets to direct the funding. And it should be, according to the Constitution, Congress. An executive order should not be able to override where, the people's house wants funding to go. So that's the legality of said order is highly questionable as well. And I think Robert does mention that, and that's to his credit. Well, let's talk about our last subject here being the affordable housing development at the Salt Flats. I would 100% agree. Housing is economic development, and economic development should lead to more housing. So, what's the current project at? I saw that there's now two developers that are going to be helping to build that project out, or am I wrong there? I thought I saw that
Well,
recently.
there's the main developer is going to oversee the whole thing. That's Brickwell. And then we talked with Rural Homes last week, and one other one. What was the other one? Um, so the two that we talked to last week were doing townhomes and modular homes.
Okay.
So, which is the smaller number? I think it's less than 100 between the two developers in that area. And those were, for sale products that people could buy. And then, the majority of them are going to be multi-units. So previously we had talked about the VOA, Volunteers of America, um, working with Grand Junction Housing Authority and the VA. That's going to be about, I think, 70 to 80 units more for veterans. And then Brickwell will work on some very large areas with high density multi units, mostly for below market rate rent. I mean, all for below market rate rent. So some of those rents could go down to, $50 a
Hmm.
month for a homeless person that is able to get a voucher and get
Cool.
housing.
How
So
many units total are planned?
well, it depends on those multi-units. They haven't really been sketched out yet, but they could be anywhere from 2 to 400 units. So we could go close to 500 units total in that little space, which would be
Fantastic.
very high concentration. It sounds a little, you know, packed in there. It is. And that's by design so we can offer more services. It'll be on a bus route. There'll be bike lanes. It's close to jobs. It's close to groceries. It's close to the VA. So it's a good location. And it's definitely what we need right now. It's like, as we talked about, it's pretty much one and two on housing. And I used to put homelessness as being third, but homelessness is part of the housing picture.
Totally.
So it's definitely housing and economic development, better jobs and more, always more jobs. If we don't have more affordable housing, our economy is going to be stagnant for a while
Hmm.
until we can get a place for people to live. I've been very surprised. We just, we're told that the junction is full, which is kind of ahead of schedule. So that's almost 300 units. And they are not, they're pretty pricey, but they're full. So, that tells you that there's an extremely high demand for. And with the college growing, they're using up a lot of space. If they're able to build some more dorm rooms, that'll take some pressure off the core area. So, but the employers all tell us, and the economic development people, we can bring companies here, but they're very concerned about housing. The employers can recruit people, but if they're from the Midwest or East or South, they choke on the cost of housing in Colorado.
Hmm.
So, it's definitely a deterrent to recruiting. And the Salt Flats is going to help a lot. It's going to get a lot of people off the streets. It'll keep people that are on the verge of becoming homeless into affordable housing. Maybe they're in trailer parks they're paying market rate and their fees are going up and they're not going to be able to stay there. This will be a place for them to go. So it'll be a catch-all. It'll be for frontline workers. It'll be for low-income blue-collar workers. Look at the jobs around here. I mean, they've always been, a lot of retail, a lot of services, a lot of food, and those are low paying jobs. But, if you want those things to be here, you have to have a workforce. And this will be a place to accommodate that, hopefully.
Great. I think that's so important. And how you've talked several times about increasing, the wages here locally. What do you think can be a good driver to increase employee wages for just the average person in Grand Junction?
Well, number one on that is always grow from within. So that means companies that are here pay decent wages, have good benefits. If we can get them to expand here, that's the easiest path to good jobs. Secondly, of course, is recruiting companies to come to the area. It's very competitive right now. GJEP, the Economic Partnership, always says that we're up against Reno, Salt Lake, St. George, uh, what else? Boise.
Hmm.
So companies that are looking at being in this kind of middle of the West are looking at those communities which have larger workforces, more colleges, lower cost of housing, a lot of them. So we have to compete with that, and that's very difficult. And those are, we're going after jobs. Right now, we're going after jobs that are in traditional industries here. So, healthcare, um, aviation, extractive industries. Um, I can't remember what else is on that list. There's five things. But I think we have to expand that. It's a time. A lot of the people that are coming here to work are remote workers. They have good wages, but they're onesies and twosies, and they're
Hmm.
mobile. They might stay here for a while and then leave. So I'm not sure they're a great target. I know they are targeting some of those folks. They love the outdoors, they love the access to public lands, and a lot of them come here to, be outside. If they get sick of the mountain, doing the same trails all the time, they may move on to a new area. We have a pretty good sized college right now. We've got CMU Tech. So there are places. I was thinking about this yesterday, and we graduate a lot of people that are in liberal arts. So, I think the biggest number of graduates is usually in psychology.
Mm.
What industry do you bring here that uses a lot of psychology graduates? Well, we're really talking about people that are educated. So, what businesses can come here that can use an educated workforce that can quickly assimilate into a new business? Traditionally, those are finance. Um, they are, what else is there? Insurance. Those are industries that are huge, that use a lot of educated workforce people that don't necessarily have to have a finance degree. There's some other ones as well, but but to come here, you have to have attainable housing.
Right.
So
Especially if you're a young professional.
it's a chicken and egg thing. So
Yeah. And just to confirm, because I wanted to check myself, the number one bachelor degree is actually business. 19% of bachelor degrees.
oh, you're kidding.
Uh-uh.
Well, I used to work with the university. It was psychology back in the day.
Yeah. As it gets more expensive, people are going there to try and make money. Or, I mean, you have to. And, but then second place is health professionals and related programs, and then social studies and sciences and history. So there you go.
Awesome.
That's
Yeah.
my crew. Yeah, but you're right. If we, and we have declining enrollment and like declining birth rates in our state, we need to attract people
Yep.
so desperately. And I just want to say I appreciate the work that I know you've done a lot in regards to trying to get Salt Flats off the ground, and this has been really a major commitment that you've followed through on in trying to get more housing in our valley. And I appreciate
Really,
that.
really hammering it down on single family attainable housing. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically number one, food, water, shelter. So if we're struggling to provide those things, then
yeah.
we really need to refocus our priorities. Scott, well, here's last one. I know we went a little extra today, so I appreciate that. Um, One thing you and I have talked about was just transparency in local government. And while we were watching the last election go on, every candidate commits to, I want to be more transparent. I want to communicate more. What have you seen that has been better out of this council, and what have you seen that has maybe struggled to match that commitment?
Well, I think we have a lot of work to do because of the shenanigans that went on with Fourth and Fifth Street. The way that all played out, there wasn't a lot of transparency on what their plans were. I would invite the new, members, and we really haven't had a lot of opportunity to talk, but I don't know what they're thinking, and nobody in the public does either. Okay, do you want to work on, to me, they've talked about working on the base back to the basics. Well, back
Hmm.
to the basics is what I've always worked on, I feel. And so that's housing, homelessness, economic development, and sustainability for me, because we live in a desert. We have to build up some resiliency to what's coming our way. And I am very, very concerned about the long-term prospects for drought
Sure.
around. So pretty much we have not prioritized any of those things as being in any particular order. So, I don't feel like there's been a lot of transparency at all. I'm pushing for it. I'm talking about it. I have called them out, as you probably know, about you ran on transparency. Where's the transparency? Several friends have said the only transparency is that where you don't have transparency. So,
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there isn't a lot out there as far as the direction that we want to go. It's always a surprise at the meeting.
Mm,
Okay, we want to do this, we want to do that. All right, well, let's talk about it. No, we're not going to talk about it. We're going to vote on it tonight. Well, that's not really transparency, and it's absolutely not including the public in the discussion. I mean, that was part of their dialogue as well. Now, Cody Kennedy and I, to his credit, when we got on city council together, we said we wanted to be more out in the public. We wanted to have more discussion, and we are doing that now. So we have the program called Meet You There. It was definitely a part of our working on that. Kelsey Coleman is new and she is awesome. She came over from CMU and she's been setting up. I went to two events last week. Tomorrow, by the way, is meet us in Orchard Mesa. We will be at Daylight Donuts from 12 to 1:30. Uh,
nice.
Donuts with city council members, myself, Robert, and Anna, I think are going to be there. And they're just discussions. Thursday, I had an awesome experience at farmers market. A lot of people came up and talked about different things. So it's been, I think we're making headway. But we have to get everybody out there. There was only myself and Jason at farmers market, which is one of the premier opportunities to talk to the public. So I think we have a forum on the 28th of October at the library, which I think almost all city council is going to be there. So, there's some chances for the public to do a gut check on transparency. And, I feel very often that we can't just represent one piece of the public. We have to represent everyone and we have to listen to everyone. And that is, what I ran on. That's the way I play every day. Some people get upset if they get attacked in public or somebody yells at them. It's like, okay, that's all part of it. You got to have a thick skin. Well, those of us that have been out there for a long time are used to it. And, usually I reach out to the people that are coming at us. Tom's one of them. Hey, Tom, give me a call. Let's have coffee. And of course, they back off then because it's a lot easier to take pot shots from the podium than it is to sit down and really show your cards. Okay, you have a problem with this. What would you like to see? And usually, that's a
Hmm.
little fuzzy area. It's harder to come up with a solution than it is to come up with a problem.
Agreed. Agreed.
And
Long on
it,
complaints, short on solutions.
well, and my mantra is the answer is on the streets.
Hmm.
You get the answer from the public, you get the answer from talking to people, everyday people out on the streets. They're the ones that come up with the ideas. They're the ones that tell you about their struggles and the good things that are happening to them. It doesn't come from reading the paper. It doesn't come from blogs. It doesn't come from social media. Those are all support things for your information base. But you got to sit down and talk to people. So
Totally. Scott, well, I appreciate it. I think that's a great way to end. We're
yeah,
all
thanks,
about
Rick. Really
sit.
appreciate the show.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's important for us to continue to talk and also have the community know what's going on. So thank you all for joining us today. If you want to be a member, we are on Patreon. We appreciate the support. We'll continue going. And Scott, we'll just kind of talk after this, but thank you for jumping on Better Together.
Great. Thanks, everyone.